I'm an avid hiker, and when I can't make hour-long plus drives up the mountains, I enjoy nice hikes near my home. This particular hike near my home is 5 miles in many different directions. Kinda like a Goosebumps book, if you know what I mean. You can only see the trees and greenery on one hike, or a massive waterfall on another. Follow the river on one, see the abandoned mines and whatnot. I decided to go to the waterfall this time. It was about 2.5 miles in. I sat and did some work, enjoying the solitude of it. When I was ready to leave, I looked around and saw a family. There was a father, mother and 3 kids. I packed my things and went to leave. Now, I'm a major people hater. I prefer to hike in areas where there are no people for miles. I choose to go a different way to the trailhead because I didn't want to run into this family again. I checked my map on my cell phone and then found a route that I could take back. It seemed isolating enough. I immediately noticed this trailhead was not man-made, but just probably what was left after some flooding. It was going upriver away from the waterfall, and I was so close to the river, all I had to do was walk out onto a bent tree and I could touch the water. It was a very thin trail, not big enough for people to walk side by side, and covered in thick roots. I enjoyed this. It was peaceful. When I was walking, I did pass some girls who had hammocks hooked up to read in about 20 feet to my right. After I hiked past this, I had nothing but the sound of the slow moving river. That's until I heard the footsteps coming behind me. I didn't want to deal with people, so I stepped out onto the side where a tree hung over the river and waited for them to pass. It was that damn family from the waterfall. I could have sworn they went by in the complete opposite direction, but who cares? I waited a few minutes before I started walking again. I didn't want to run into them. Pretty soon, their voices disappeared into the distance. I was able to go back to enjoying the peace and beauty around me. I hiked for another 5 minutes or so when I had a turn on a sharp corner around a major bend in the river. That's when I saw it. This man, the father, was standing there on the other side, crouched down like he was gonna scare me. I screamed and he laughed. I got really angry and I noticed his family was nowhere near us. I yelled, "What the hell's wrong with you?" Not bothering to control my anger, I was annoyed that I encountered another human and they had to be stupid to me. He wouldn't stop laughing. I realised that I was dealing with an idiot or a psychopath. I didn't want to deal with either, so I turned around and booked it. I could hear him behind me. He was following. He wasn't a very big man. He stood about 5'6", around 200 pounds, but he was keeping pace about 20 feet behind me. Let me tell you that this path is not for running. I nearly went sideways into the river sometimes, but this gave me a few ideas too. The routes I could handle mostly. I knew the terrain pretty well. As long as I focused on my quickly paced steps around the thick root system and kept my balance, I'd make it. I was running back towards the waterfall now, downriver, where surely there were people around. It was a straight shot. But then, I remembered the hammock girls. I remembered that they were slightly hidden, and if I'd gone round the corner quick, the guy wouldn't be able to see me because of the natural curves in the path. I sprinted on the trail and burst into the hammocks girls area. I really quickly said what happened. "Man following me, help." And they hid me behind the lowest hammock. It took us maybe 5 or 8 seconds max to get set up, and the 3 of us watched this guy who ran past not too long after. I was safely hidden. I stayed with the girls for a few minutes just to be safe, explaining what happened, catching my breath, and then went back to the way I come from upriver. I did not want to see this guy again. I thought it was over. Sadly not. As I again hiked up trail on the river, my original remote path back to the trailhead, I tried to calm myself. I couldn't get my mind to stop thinking that I was being followed. I just tried to hurry and get out of there as quick as I could. I turned a sharp right at the boulder that the man was hiding behind before, and kept pushing through the rough trail. I decided to focus on the sound of the river that was to my left, because I couldn't get the sound of my heart out of my ears. Now the sound of my heart palpitations morphed into the sound of footsteps almost immediately. I realised I was being followed again. I looked back and guess who? It's that damn father again. I got mad as hell. I stopped and turned around. I yelled at him for following me. I told him to stop. I yelled profanities too. I threw a pine cone at him. He smiled a toothy grin and kept slowly walking towards me as it bounced off his shoulder. He wasn't fazed by the pine cone. He just kept smiling as if I was an old friend. The thing is though, what this guy didn't know is that I'm an army combat veteran and a domestic abuse survivor. I have PTSD from both and I have skills that many don't. Dude chose the wrong person to mess with. I had enough. I already hated people enough, but this guy was crossing the line way too much for me. I charged at him. I finally wiped that stupid look off his face. I was seeing red at this point. I will not be made to feel unsafe in the only place I can feel safe at. Screw this guy. Seriously, screw him. I ran directly at him and knocked him down with the full force of my body crashing into him. I screamed at him as I hit him blindly. I grabbed his hair and the waistband of the back of his pants and started dragging him to the end of the trail. He was yelling at me this time. Every time he fought back, I gave him a swift kick. I gave him several explanations for why his behaviour was so stupid. And then, a kick pushed him into the river. I told him to go off in the water and not come back until I'm long gone. I turned in the other direction I've been walking from and decided that I needed to take another detour just to get back safely. I knew there was a trailhead parallelish to the one that I was on to my right, and I looked around for a clear place to climb up onto the steep hill. It was mostly granite and moss and ivy. I hadn't planned an impromptu rock climb that day, but whatever. I found a spot and started climbing until I got scared out of my wits again by three guys sitting in the middle of the hill. They were smoking weed and completely hidden. Once I caught my breath again, I asked if they heard me screaming and they said they did, but that they thought it had been covered. I rolled my eyes and told them to kick anybody down the hill that tried to follow me, and I continued. It took me a while to cover the 2.5 miles back to the trailhead that day, because I kept looking back, taking detours and hiking randomly, but when I did, I called the cops and alerted the park ranger about the guy. I didn't know any other details on that. The cop laughed and said, "Good for you," when I told him what I did. Honestly, I doubt they even did anything after. No, I haven't been back to that place since, sadly. When I was 18, I spent a lot of time in the coastal wilderness. My favourite spot was a set of waterfalls several miles from the nearest parking area. Most visitors just parked in the RV area and swam in the creek along the gravel road. In the 2 years I spent hiking there, I never saw anybody further than half a mile into the trail. Anyway, one Saturday, I took my girlfriend to see the waterfalls since she had never seen one in person before. We set off on the trail, and not even 15 minutes into the walk, she grabs my arm and quietly said she felt like she was being watched. She felt really scared. I assured her that everything was okay. The only other thing that I had to worry about while being out in the woods was a bear once. We continued, but she couldn't stop shaking the feeling of being watched. I figured she just wasn't used to being out in the open wilderness and was having trouble adjusting. A couple of hours later, we finally reached the end of the trail and had a picnic at the bottom of the falls. After we finished eating, she tried to check her phone for messages and started to panic when she realised we didn't have service. I explained to her that there was no self-service reception anywhere around for miles. I said that nobody was around for miles, we could enjoy the peace of it, but this of course made her panic. We started heading back almost immediately because she clearly was scared and not enjoying it. On the way back, I explained to her how many times I'd been out here on my own and never had any problems, but she still couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. So we're about a mile from the falls on the only trail around when we heard somebody call from behind. I then nearly had a heart attack as I turned to see a man walking behind us. He had a rifle over his shoulder, a heavy beard, and his hat was tipped low. "What can I do for you?" I asked him, trying to sound friendly. "You guys left your cell phone back at the falls," he said. I saw a slight grin behind his beard and looked at my girlfriend. "Oh, thanks for that." I extended my hand. He shook his head and told me that he didn't bring it. It was sitting up there. He said that we should follow him up there, and he's going to take care of us. It's too dangerous to go with just the two of us. We politely declined and made our way back down the trail as quickly as we could, with him following us on the trail several feet behind. He followed us all the way back to our car, and then she showed me her cell phone when I opened the door. I haven't been back to that trail since. Summer camp counsellor here. I work every summer for a camp for 5 weeks. One time we're backpacking to the tallest peak in my state. At night, me and a co-worker and friend went on a night hike to get away from the kids. We eventually ended up about a quarter of a mile away from everyone. We're laying down on a slope in a patch of grass to stargaze. As we're lying there, I heard a beautiful sound behind me. It's running water. I'd never heard water running before and thought to myself, wow, this is beautiful. All I could imagine was crisp, clear water gracefully trickling by. I got in this image stuck in my head now. I had to go and find this. I needed to go and find this. Now behind us was just dense forest and brush, so it would have been hard to find at night, but it sounded so close to us. Me and my friend looked at each other without saying a word, and I knew he thought the exact same thing as me. I said to myself, let's wait 5 minutes and decide if we should go. It felt like a playful presence was trying to persuade us to go over there. I decided we should go check it out, and we stood up without saying a word to each other. It sort of happened. As we approached the sound, it became quieter and quieter. We stopped, not knowing if we wanted to continue. As we stood there, the noise of trickling water became louder and louder until it sounded like we were standing next to a river. I then said that we should maybe come back tomorrow to find it. We agreed to come back. When I made that decision, the sound of the creek vanished along with the urge to go. There was only silence. The presence I felt earlier suddenly became sinister. It just kind of felt dark. Kind of similar to knowing somebody's watching you. I felt this fear slowly creep on me. We walked back to the camp quickly without talking to one another. Once we got back, we started talking about what just happened. My friend had the exact same urge to go and find the creek. He also had the internal battle in fighting the urge to go and look for it. When we got back, it was like a trance had only been lifted, and we realised what had happened. We both could think clearer, like a fog had been lifted. The urge I felt didn't feel like it was my own mind anymore. It's hard to explain, like an urge to go to a place that wasn't my own. The next morning, we went back to the spot where we were to look for the creek. We eventually made it exactly where we were before, and we looked and couldn't find any signs of creeks, let alone water. I decided to also look on some maps, and there were no creeks or water nearby. I'm scared to imagine what would have happened if we followed the sound of water due to the ominous presence we both felt. If I was by myself, I would have thought I was imagining it, but my friend too felt it, the urge, experienced everything that I did. I don't know what it was, but it was eerie to say the least. What's strange is that neither of us actually said anything to each other. That's once we heard the sound of the water, yet we both made the decision to go and look for it without asking each other, and neither of us questioned it, and we both heard it getting louder and louder. We both felt the sinister presence after, trying to lure us in. So one year, my friend invited me to stay up in the woods at this old campsite that he went to every year with his family. It was fun. We fished and went swimming and everything. And one night we had this little bonfire and we had marshmallows there and whatnot. You know, just camping stuff. But then, at 2 in the morning, somebody whistled the Hunger Games call. Me being an avid whistler, one of my few skills, whistled the return call. They did it again, and I did so. The campsite had maybe 40 people, and everyone was in their tents except for me and my friend, the whistler. So this went on for about 5 minutes. The whistles devolved into random notes and counter melodies until I got fed up and decided to find them. I stood up and walked into the forest barefoot. I had no flashlight, a total idiot. No, I didn't want to call out to them, that would be too easy. Instead, I slunk through the forest quietly, trying to hone in on their whistle. It took about 20 minutes before I realised that my friend was too far away from the campsite. It might not have been him. A couple of minutes later, I reached a clearing. There was a little cliff that ran down into the lake, and a couple of trees had fallen over. There were 3 kids just sitting out at the lake, looking onwards. I called to them, saying that I'd been looking for them and how fun whistling was, and who were they, but they didn't reply. They just sat there and stared at the lake. It was positively eerie. They didn't seem to hear me. I didn't get any closer to them. I didn't want to spook them and have the demon throw me over the cliff or something. As soon as I made it back to my campsite, there was no more whistling. In the morning I asked if anybody else had heard it, and everybody said no. I was camping with 2 college friends, way the hell out in the mountains of Trinity Country in far northern California. It wasn't an established campsite, just a nice spot many miles down a dirt road off the main highway, Route 299. It's largely isolated to begin with. There might not have been another soul for miles. This is a very rural and rugged area, and it's part of a region where a lot of weed is grown illegally, and this makes it dangerous at times. We got to this spot late in the day, a nice little clearing along a stream, and set up camp. We sat around the campfire after dark, shooting the stuff like usual. We're suddenly interrupted though when a large animal explodes out of the brush and seems to stop right at the circle of our fire. But then we didn't hear it leave, not even a twig crack. It was gone though. We searched around with our torches. It seemed unusual to all of us that an animal would arrive so loudly. We listened to it approach for several oh crap seconds, and then there was no more sound. One of my friends, who was somewhat of a local, said he thought it was a puma. It was unnerving to say the least. We laughed it off, drank beer and eventually crashed out, with one friend and I in a large 2-person tent, and the other in a tiny single-person tent next to us. We fell asleep for a few hours then. Suddenly, out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, I wake up. There were footsteps outside the tent now. I don't know why, but I felt a very strong intuition not to call out my friends for help. Even though I was worried that my friend had been out, and maybe he was going to get attacked or something. Maybe I was overthinking, maybe he went out to pee or something. And then, the person walking called out and I almost shat myself. It wasn't my friend, it was some random guy. He circled our tents for the next 5 minutes calling, "Hello? Hello?" He said it over and over again, in a scarily calm voice and measured one. Remember, this is in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. No one should be around. I then had this scary instinct that was to stay silent and wait for an attack, which I did. I had my knife in my hand. My friend in my tent slept through all of it. The weird guy left eventually with no sound, not a vehicle sound, anything, and dawn eventually arrived. The next day, the first thing I decided to do was ask my buddy in tent 2 whether he heard the dude walking around or not. He did. He heard the exact same thing as me. My other friend, who'd been asleep, was obviously confused, asking why I didn't wake him up and stuff. We were saying that this was creepy as hell, and the guy was moving around and speaking in a really weird vibe. Now this friend wasn't the type to get scared easily, but he seemed terrified. It creeped us out not knowing where he went or why he was here. I think the part that really creeped us out was, how the hell did he get this far out into the wilderness on his own? He obviously didn't have a vehicle or we would have heard it, and we didn't see anybody around for miles. I don't know, it's just creepy thinking of that. A couple of years ago, I was stressed out from college and big city life. I decided to spend a long weekend in the woods doing what my friends consider utter lunacy and us outdoorsy people consider Nirvana. Deep woods free camping in the winter, alone. While this sounds like the beginning of a missing persons report, if you're an experienced outdoorsman, it's pretty safe. I also take a secret pleasure in being the white trash warrior that my dad hoped I'd be. I always hated the feeling of claustrophobia that come with being female in the city, avoiding eye contact, not walking alone at night. You see, when you're a girl out alone in the woods, you're in charge. You're safe within the warm embrace of your own solitary freedom, or so I thought. I spent a few hours on the roads, the surroundings getting wider and wider as I drove. I parked in an allowed roadside ditch. I used a compass and a map. I eventually hiked until I was within a mile's reach or so of some good ice fishing. I was at least 4 miles from the road. I made an extremely discreet camp in a clearing, with just one little hole in the snow for my tiny tent and tiny campfire. After a couple beautiful days of hiking and relaxing around camp, I made the trek to finish the fishing. Everything was in utter winter stillness. The air was crisp, and the only signs that I wasn't in a perfect vacuum were the twitterings of birds, but they were very distant, and you could hear some waterfalls that were half frozen. After about a mile or so of crunching along in the snow, I silently celebrated my compass skills when I come out at the exact same point I intended to. I punched a hole in the snow at the thin crust of the ice. I got my fishing on. My first catch come quickly. After spending weeks under a frozen surface, the fish come quickly. They're hungry. I was feeling oddly fatigued and jumpy, so I decided to just clean the fish here and now and take it straight back to camp to cook. I quickly realised that my fish preparation skills were rusty at best. I cursed my lack of preparation as I cut myself for the second time. Something in my peripheral senses was irritating me, but I was very set in my task, focusing on the motions in the slippery mess. Now the thing in my peripheral senses was growing more irritating, like the buzzing of a fly or the yammering of a sibling. I carved and hacked, but I sliced my hand freshly open as a fish slipped out of my hands and into the snow. Frustrated, I screamed out, "Can you stop with that whistling?" Silence resumed. Then, my heart stopped. Living in a college neighbourhood, I'd grown so accustomed to white noise that I failed to recognise how grossly inappropriate this sound was in context. The silence weighed down on me as I broke into sweat. The only reason a human would be this deep in the woods would be to hunt. No other hunter would give themselves away like that. Also, if he was whistling for no reason, then why the hell didn't he react to me? Why didn't he yell back at me, apologise? No, there was nothing. Just total stillness of the woods. Silence as pure as it was before I spoke. For a brief second, I was unsure if I heard birds or something. I just decided the fish was a lost cause. I slung my gear over my shoulder and headed for camp. I trudged off into the woods, and about a quarter of a mile from camp, I saw a large mass protruding from the snow. It was broken, it's hard to describe, like a moth to a flame. I trudged up to what materialised into the closing distance as a moose kill, a really good moose kill, a clean shot through the unturned eye. It was staring at me and saying something, saying that something was imposing a sense of dread on me, but I couldn't translate. I ran. I ran as hard and fast as I could. In the snow, the woods, everything looks the same. I knew I was moving south. I knew I'd passed the camp on the east. I made for the road, eventually slowing down to a weary trudge, calming at the comfort of the sight of the woods clearing ahead of me to make way for the country road. I looked down to my left and I see my car 50 yards or so down. I jogged to it and drove the lonely 15 miles to the first motel that I saw. At this point, I abandoned my belongings. Now, it was only when I was sitting up watching infomercials at night that it started to fall together. Why would the Park Service issue free camp passes for the same stretch of woods that they allow hunting? The moose defined everything in my rudimentary understanding of hunting. Even with the snow to cool it, decomposition starts quickly on an animal that big. You'd have time for a few pictures, but you want to have it dressed quickly. Why would you kill a moose 5 miles into the forest? How could you ever drag it back to the road? In the morning, in my sleep-deprived and paranoid state, I described everything I'd seen and thought I heard to a very confused park ranger. He seemed more angry about illegal hunting than any of what I was saying. He said that he wanted to come pick me up and have me show him everything. I said I was only going if he brought a gun. He sighed with expiration and told me to meet him. We rode out into the woods on an ATV, with me awkwardly riding on the back as if I was on the back of the world's awkwardest motorcycle. We get to a large impression in the snow where the moose had been. Blood was everywhere. There was also a distinct track mark of carcass being dragged. The drag marks made a smooth trail in the snow as if the carcass were on a tarp. The ranger said that he should take me back now. He asked me where my camp was. I pointed in the direction of the drag marks. It looked like he was finally sharing my unease. Back at the hotel, I washed my clothes in the sink and prepared to drive home for the morning. Then I received a call from an unknown number. It was a park ranger. The moose had been dragged to my campsite. He described the scene as a huge mess. He wasn't sure if it was an animal. It was not normal how messy this was. Somebody had cut into my tent with a knife. I asked about the rest of my belongings. He darkly said, "You don't want them back. They're covered in moose blood." So, what happens now? Well, we're gonna keep an eye out for this guy. I haven't heard or seen anything like this in my life before. I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry that you had to see all of this. That was it. No closure, no explanation. In the years that have passed, I've tried every different application of reason. A hunter who needed help, but knew I was already gone. A deranged psychopath looking to make his second kill. I don't know.
Despite living out in the middle of nowhere on a 400-acre farm, we still have problems with someone coming into our house, moving stuff around, and occasionally taking something like trash bags or food. It started in early 2016. We would be laying in bed and hear stuff being moved around in the middle of night, but by the time we got up and about, there was no one there. Damage was done to our old front door after someone tried to get in. Several times we would come home to the front door hanging open. This behaviour isn't constant. It actually only happens once or twice every couple of months. Last month I heard a car door shut in the middle of the night, and when we checked, the lights were on the inside. Our motion detector lights outside tripped at all hours of the night. Well, I saw this person for the first time last night. It was only a glimpse, and they were wearing dark clothes. By the time my husband got out there, they were gone. I don't know where they go, but they always run. We hear them running sometimes, down the left of our house towards a field. There are woods beyond that. Okay, today I had my music playing over a speaker in the kitchen while I jump in the shower. Not 4 to 6 minutes after I got in, I heard my music suddenly shut off. I had a really bad feeling, but I also felt like I should just stay in the locked bathroom. I'm glad I did. My music had been paused, my phone moved completely, my front door was hanging open, and there was mud on my floor. I've always had an issue with anxiety, and I'm kind of a paranoid person anyway, so it's super hard for me to attempt to stay calm. My husband will be home soon and keeps texting me to make sure everything is okay, and I'm not stressing too bad, because it's not good for the baby. So creepy guy who's been stalking my house and doesn't like music, let's not meet again. I have an update. We went to the police station yesterday for the first time. They took our statements, said cameras were a good idea, and to call them if anything else happens. Thanks for the advice. We have replaced the front and back doors, we've installed a deadbolt, we have 2 dogs, my husband is getting cameras and our own guns, and I know how to properly use them now.